Hey, Michelle.
Yes.
When I don't play my video, how do I get my photo up there like yours?
I put my camera off and somehow I had saved my picture to my profile.
I'm sitting here playing with it, trying to figure it out, and it's not working for me. I don't want to put something inappropriate up there by accident.
No, we wouldn't want that.
I just have no comment on that, James. No comment.
I've tried background and filters and
Hi, Sarah. This is Summer Sears. I'm the CPA helping you guys out, and I think I know how to do it.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay, let's give it a shot. So at the bottom of my screen, I show the participants. And if you click on participants, you should see your name on the list of participants.
Mm-hmm.
And if you hover over it, I see a mute button and a more button.
See, I don't have that function.
Oh,
Okay.
maybe you have to be presenter or something.
I think you're
For the
right.
shot.
Thank you. I think I can do it when I get on my corner stuff. I'll work on it.
There you go.
Thank you, Summer.
Yeah.
I see it. I see it when I'm doing me.
Everyone's a little different too. I know that.
It's been so long since I did mine that I'm like, I don't remember now.
Yeah,
Sorry, James.
that's okay. I don't want to accidentally put your face on my name.
That would be interesting.
Good evening, everybody. We are live and recording, and I believe that Charles is on now. If he wants to at least start out and call the meeting to order.
I certainly shall. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I've gone over to using headphones with an audio jack because I can't hear stuff anymore. I don't know if it's age or just having kids. So either way, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. So if you'll all stand and we'll recite the pledge and we'll get moving. I pledge allegiance to the flag,
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic,
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I still hold true to the fact that if anyone can actually say the pledge without messing it up in a Zoom meeting with everyone at different time paces, we are all doing well. Okay, so Vicki, with that, we need to elect a budget committee chair.
Correct.
If there is no nominations for one, I would like to nominate Mr. Yonley, if you would be so willing to be our chair this year.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, I would be willing to accept that nomination.
Excellent. Do we have to do a vote on this then, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay. So I have made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second it.
Okay, all those in favor of Mr. Yonley being our budget committee chair, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. And with that, Jim, I am going to then hand it over to you at this point as the budget committee chair.
All right, well, thank you. So the next is to receive the budget message. So that would go to our, I apologize. What's our, is it Summer Sears? Is she our delivering the budget?
That's
yes, I
it.
would assume so. Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Summer. I'm a CPA located over here in beautiful Bend, Oregon, and fortunate enough to help you guys out with some finance stuff while you're in between positions. And the budget was a big part of that. So with the help of the department heads, we put this proposed budget together for you to review. And hopefully approve.
You're coming in kind of scratchy.
Oh, no. Hmm.
It's a little rough, but we can still understand what you're saying. At least I can. I don't know about the rest of the budget committee here.
I can hear it okay. I guess we can keep trying.
Is this better or worse?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, good. All right. So first of all, whenever I'm working with the budget committee or council, I just want to say thank you for serving. I know you guys put a lot of time and effort into this and you're donating your time. I know you're busy, so thank you so much for participating in this process. It's important, so thank you for doing it, stepping up. You are likely all familiar with what the budget committee's role is, but I'll summarize kind of how I see it and how I interpret it from the Department of Revenue. The budget committee's purpose is to look at a budget that's been proposed by staff and make sure that that budget is in alignment with the governing body, in your case, council's goals and priorities. Is this budget moving in the direction that the governing body determined? So we're going to look through it. You're going to ask questions. We're going to review it and discuss it. We can make additions to this proposed budget. We can make deletions from this proposed budget. We can change it at this point, and that is open for discussion in the committee. This is a proposal, and it is just that. The other goal of the budget committee is to approve a tax rate and set that tax rate. Once you approve that and the budget, it then goes to the city council for a formal adoption. And feel free to stop me with questions anytime. It's a little tougher to do that with Zoom, obviously. If you want to throw your hand up with the button, you can do that. You can just say, hey, Summer, and interrupt me. Anything you want to do is good by me. Within this budget, we did not make any changes to the structure of the city's financials or the funds. You still have the same fund structure that you've been looking at in the past years. The overall budget is about 10.1 million, and that's an increase from last year of around 7 to 8%. And I want to talk just quickly about, not quickly, but I do want to talk about the major contributors to that increase in the budget. One large decision that we made, that the department heads made in this budget, is to pay off some debt. So you have some debt left over in your sewer fund and your water fund, and management would like to pay that off and save the city and taxpayers or ratepayers some interest and free up some debt capacity in case we need to look at financing for projects in the future. There's also an increase in personnel services, and a piece of that is the city manager position, which we have added to the proposed budget as a recommendation. I have added that in as a recommendation. There's also a 1.63, I believe, % COLA that's been added. And then this year is going to be another year for PERS rate increases. Those happen every 2 years. And there is a substantial rate increase that the city will recognize in contributing to PERS this upcoming year. We've got some capital outlay built into the budget for some police radios, some parks equipment, and other public works improvement projects. Those are laid out within the capital outlay budgets within each fund. And I will say that for those projects, you will see that many of those are carryovers from this current year. There are several projects that were slated for this year and budgeted for this current year that may not get done by June. So we've included those in next year's budget in case they roll over. Overall, for the general fund, I considered your general fund to be stable. In fact, it's been inclining and growing, the general fund balance, over the past several years. What I'm seeing is that it's currently leveling off. Those increases are leveling off. which is just fine. But what's going to happen is that by the trends, I'm seeing that your expenditures are increasing at a higher rate than your revenues are increasing, which if left, will start bringing that trend down. And I've done some very rough forecasts that you will see in the budget message that kind of show that trend. Again, they're rough estimates and projections, but it's something that council will want to look at. And is if you decide to go with the city manager position, is something that they will likely want to prioritize with you and find a way to make sure that you can maintain the health of the general fund. For public works, we talked about the debt payoff. That's going to bring those operating fund balances down temporarily in order to pay off the debt that's happening in those separate funds. So you're going to see transfers, you probably did see as you looked through the budget document, transfers from water and sewer funds over to separate bond debt service funds, and then the payout or payoff from those other funds. You're also going to see master plan updates and a lot of other scheduled projects happening in public works, including parks. For police, we're not seeing any substantial changes in police operations. We do have the purchase of the radios. Otherwise, I'm not seeing anything else substantial happening within police operations. And the final thing that I noted just kind of in the bottom summary of the budget message was the Arp Funds, or American Rescue Plan funds. So I'm not sure the extent to which City Council has discussed this opportunity, and I can go into it a little bit more as I understand it, but this is definitely something to look into, especially without a city manager and without a finance director. I think it's going to fall on council, if it hasn't already, to make sure that you're registered to receive that money. There are some things the city needs to do to be eligible to receive those funds. And that is my summary of the overall budget message. Do you have any questions for me at this point?
Jim, how would you like to handle questions on this one? Just free for all, or do you just want to go round table?
Well, let's see here. In the past, we've kind of just generally left it open for council members, but we do still have discussion later on as well. So does anybody out there have any questions at this point in time for the budget message?
I'll start off real quick. Of course, I have always got questions.
Sure.
So, Ms. Sears and I guess Vicki and the rest of the department heads as well, is leading into this budget, we did ask to understand 3 different potential budget layouts. One would be one with a city manager, or whatever we call it. I know that we can't officially have a quote unquote city manager, but a city lead, or whatever we want to call it, city officer. Another one was bringing back on a finance person, maybe part-time, and it's fleeting on me right now, but we also had a third. My question to the department heads and Vicki on this one is, are you guys making the recommendation that you believe it's in the best interest of the city to move forward with the, for lack of a better title at this point in time, a city manager being brought on?
If I may, this is Summer, if I may initially respond, and then
Sure.
You can also get input from the department heads as well. So yes, we did look at several options. I saw council's directive to consider several different potential makeups of what the administrative staffing would look like. And I ended up looking at or analyzing 6 different options. So I made some assumptions based on what it looked like council's intention and direction was leading, and thought about, okay, well, they want these ones, but what if we did this, or what if we did that? What might work best from what I see in other cities, things that are working and things that are not working. from a city manager, city administrator standpoint. So the recommendation that came through the proposed budget is my recommendation.
Okay. It's your recommendation. Okay.
My recommendation, yeah. And you're welcome to get input from the department heads. I certainly did. I called a meeting and I said, this is what we're looking at. We have these options, and showed them cost analysis, and I went through and got their input. And I'm very grateful for their candidness and their perspective.
We have some great department heads for sure. They definitely don't shy away from good opinions.
No, I've really enjoyed working with all of them. So yes, I have a very good crew.
Then a follow-up question based off of that. Do you, and by the way, I am so sorry, Summer. Do you want to be called Summer or Miss Sears, or how would you like to be? Okay. Do you think that we could find a qualified individual for the roughly $53,000 a year to fill that position? Yeah, I think that's what I'm reading on page 6. Is expected to be about $53K. I'm assuming that doesn't include PERS and other benefits, but.
So the $53K is the incremental. All in benefits, PERS, health insurance, everything.
So you see a $53K hit to us every year.
It's above the full-time finance director position.
Okay.
And I will say that I want to get through, great question, and we can continue down this path. But I will say that I do have some slides and some more analysis to show you during the budget discussion later that might also help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I will keep my questioning quiet then. That's fine. I'll open it up to other questions from the rest of the council and or budget committee.
I really enjoyed the budget summary this time. It seemed to be a lot more spelled out, easier to understand for me. That part I appreciate. It was pretty clean, pretty cut and dry.
Good, thank you. I'm glad. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I second James. The fact that we had a 7-page summary, I got what I needed out of it very quickly. And that was how's the budget projections looking? A little worried about our forecasted spending, but we can discuss that as a council later. But you know, the COLA was right there, your recommendations are right there, and it wasn't overly wordy. So great.
Okay, so are there any other questions for the council or budget committee on just the budget message itself? Okay.
I have none.
Wait, I just wondered, I'm pretty busy right now and I haven't read all of this because I've got buku files in front of me right now. It ends on May 17th. So what is rising faster than, what expenses are rising faster than our income? If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So what is driving the increase in expenses versus the increase in income?
Right. So property tax revenues and franchise fees are the primary revenue sources within general fund. And we expect those to continue increasing, maybe 2 to 3%, depending on economy and market and everything else, right? Could be more than that. On the expense side, though, we have cost of materials and construction projects going up. And a large one is employee benefits. So PERS rates, I'm sure as you've heard, are through the roof. And unfortunately, Hubbard is no different. Health insurance actually is fairly stable this year because we've been seeing, I'm not sure about Hubbard, but 5-10% annual increases over past years. So for it to be stable, that is a good sign. But those are the primary factors. It's in the personnel and benefits and cost of materials and services primarily. And then I will note in the sewer funds, you do have some substantial infrastructure needs.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
So far.
Okay, fair enough.
So just as a comment, not necessarily a question, but PERS rates have been on the increase for quite a few years now. And maybe the question side of that is, what is actually driving the PERS rate to go up? I mean, 5, 10% every time we have a budget committee over the last, 6, 8 years, we've seen these increases. And was there some sort of law that was passed, or what's going on in that area, if you have any idea on that?
Yeah, I do. It's something that we're all tracking pretty closely, obviously, because it's a major challenge for almost every local government organization that's participating in PERS. So please don't take this as political. This is my professional understanding of how this came to be. My understanding of how this came to be is that when PERS was first created in the state of Oregon, there was a level of benefits called Tier 1 and money match that were established. And those benefits they're defined benefits, not defined contribution, meaning it doesn't matter how long you've paid into the system. If you retire, you're going to get that entire benefit package. So what happened is when all the Tier 1 folks, the initial people that participated in PERS, retired, there was not enough money in the fund, in the assets that have been contributed into the investment pool to pay those out and to sustain. So that's when PERS went through and said, okay, we're not going to be able to afford this long-term, time out, and they created a new level of PERS called Tier 2. And then since then, there's been a Tier 3, which is called OPSERP. Anyway, that's more detail you need to know. But the bottom line is that the way that PERS initially was in the beginning years created a huge hole in an unfunded liability. So it's a liability. It's going to happen when people retire, and it's not funded yet. So PERS calculates the total amount of liability, and we look at the funding rate, the amount of assets sitting out there to pay this liability. And right now there's a huge gap. So we got to fill in that hole. So instead of just doing, a 2,000% increase in our rates to fill up the hole immediately, obviously that's not sustainable, not going to happen. There's what's called a rate collar. So PERS can only increase our rates up to 20%. It's very complicated, up to a certain amount, basically. And so that's why it's taking so long, and we're seeing increase after increase after increase, is because the hole is so big that we're trying to fill, and we can only increase it a certain amount each biennium. So every 2 years, they go up the max, and then the max, and the max. And at least as of last year, the PERS board and executive management was thinking it's going to be a long time to fill in that hole, maybe even up to like 5, 6, maybe more biennium.
And eventually all the Tier 1s will die off.
Yep.
And we'll be down to Tier 2 and the other tier.
Right.
And then it'll be a leveling out, and it'll be a sustainable fund.
Correct. That's a little ways out yet, so we're gonna be in pain for a few more cycles.
Centuries.
Yeah. So
No, I understood that. Yes.
So at the end, that's what's going to continue driving. It's just a cost that we're going to have to absorb every year and every budget cycle from here on out. And it's just going to consistently be pulling funds away from us.
Yes, and unfortunately, that results in the hard questions, right? You have to either cut expenses or you have to find new revenues. But fortunately, you guys are actually in a fairly good position. There are a lot of organizations that have already had this decline for years and are barely hovering at going red. But Hubbard is not in that scenario at all. You're not even close to crisis. You could stay status quo for, again, according to very rough projections, 4 or 5 years and be completely fine, but you'd be eating away in a direction that's not going to sustain long term.
I think it's important to point out from a council standpoint is we know that we've had some good revenue, and we as a council had opted to have a few things in the city done that would definitely benefit directly our citizens. So we've kind of taken a little bit of that overage and try to put it back into what citizens could use and need. So that's why there's a little bit more fluctuation there.
That is actually a very responsible decision. Yeah, the overall goal of government is not to hoard money. It's to provide those services the best we can and find that balance.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's, any more questions about just the general budget message? If not, I'd like to go ahead and move forward with the meeting. Anybody else out there with any questions at this point in time? All right, we'll go ahead with the public hearing. On state shared revenues. At this point, we will open the public hearing on the state revenue sharing. And the next order is presentation, again, by the budget officer. So go ahead and present, please.
So some background information on state revenue sharing. State revenue sharing is, there are several resources that come in at the state level, some being state gas tax, liquor tax, cigarette tax, and marijuana tax. The state receives those, and then according to the statute, is required to appropriate those out to the local government. The caveat is that for a city to receive that state revenue sharing, they have to every year elect to receive it. And you elect to receive it by checking some boxes on some tasks. And one of those is having a public hearing at a budget committee meeting where the budget is being proposed. Another is to have another public hearing at the meeting where the budget is adopted by the city council. And then city council needs to adopt a resolution saying, hey, we've done these public hearings, and yes, please, we want to receive state money. So that is the purpose of this public hearing, is to get public input on whether or not the city should receive state revenue sharing dollars.
Okay, and along with that, we're required to provide certain city services to receive that money. Is that correct?
The use of the funds is restricted to certain purposes, at least some of them. Gas tax has to be spent for street improvement and maintenance, that kind of thing. Others are less restricted, we could say.
Okay, so any questions or discussions by the budget committee? Okay, not hearing any. Is there any public comments or questions or input?
Yeah, what page are we on right now?
Let's see. I'm basically using the agenda
Of the budget packet, and I don't know if there's anything else in the meeting that to support the state revenue sharing.
Yeah, I don't think there's a specific page on that.
I don't think there is.
It's just basically we're electing to receive shared money from the state of Oregon as the revenue sharing, and that has to do with property taxes and other tax revenues in which we actually have to request to receive, and in that we have to meet certain, provide certain services such as water, sewer. I don't know all of them offhand, but I know there's water, sewer, police services, those types of services which we have to provide to receive these benefits, or to receive this revenue sharing. I don't have those in front of me. I just remembering from the various other budget committee meetings that I've been in.
Yeah, you got the nail on the head there, Jim. That's spot on.
Yeah.
Does that help, Rocky? Yeah, there is no the specific page in the content. It's just to make sure that we do have a public open hearing on the revenue sharing, just to comply with all of the checks and balances that are required to make sure that we can receive it.
Sounds good. I love all the information I'm hearing, but I just wanted to figure out what page we're looking over so I can be caught up with you guys.
I think it's an excellent question. It means you're paying attention.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and is there any other comments or questions from the public, from the council, from the committee? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on the state revenue sharing. And we'll go ahead and move forward to the public hearing on the 2021-2022 budget. And let's go ahead and open the public hearing and ask for the presentation by the budget officer.
For the 2021-22 proposed budget, we have distributed the proposed budget both as part of the budget packet, and I believe it was made available on the city's website. We have done a high-level summary with the discussion of the budget message earlier in this meeting. And this is an opportunity for anyone in the public to provide comment, any comment on that proposed budget to the committee.
So at this point, this is, I guess, more for the council than it is for the budget officer. Is the question I have is has to do with the city manager. So I'm assuming you guys are talking about bringing on a city manager, which Hubbard hasn't had in probably, well over 15 years that I'm aware of. And as the mayor mentioned, is we're expecting to hire somebody at $53,000 a year. And at least in my experience, that would seem to be quite low when it comes to managing a city.
Yeah,
we got a
Jim, just
$10 million budget.
Yeah, that was taken out of. I misread that apparently, and Mrs. Sears is going to walk us through a little bit more detail on what we should expect to pay for a city manager.
I apologize, that was not clearer in the budget message.
Yeah, when I read that, I was like, wow, 53,000, that seems awful cheap. We can't even get a finance director for that.
I went to legal
Yeah.
asked around, did some comparatives. So you're going to be looking at closer to 115.
Yeah, that makes more sense for someone at that level with a financial insight is what we're looking for.
Close enough. So the 53,000 that you see is the incremental over what you've been paying for a full-time finance director.
So would this be a combination of finance director, city manager?
You can call it whatever you want, but in essence, yes. It will primarily be a city manager. And I wanted to ask you, if I may, so you said we can't call it a city manager. Is that part of your charter?
Yeah, apparently part of our charter says we cannot have a city manager. We learned that a few months ago, maybe about 4 months ago. But we can call them a department officer. I don't know. There's some terminology that can be used, but our charter prevents us from, quote unquote, having a city manager.
That is fascinating. I haven't seen that before. Okay. So I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna keep calling it a city manager.
That's fine. It's just a term. So that's, yeah, it's just a title. Right.
And I've forgotten the question. What was our talking point? I apologize. Oh.
Well, it had to do with the dollar amount in which we would expect to be hiring one for, and that if they were to be an overall department head slant finance director, was that a reasonable amount of money, $53,000, in which to hire somebody for that position?
Right. So the
I
15
mean,
is not,
that's
15 is.
$27 an hour, which is, you would not expect to hire somebody, with that overall responsibility at that dollar amount. So,
Yeah.
So with the city budget, are we looking at 53,000? Are we looking at 100 and some thousand? Are we looking at this year? Are we looking at next year? I don't know. And some of those questions has to do with the city council, not necessarily with you.
Right.
We have a finance person budgeted. So that salary is sitting there. So this would be, I believe, in addition to that, to give them the responsibility to take on the top job as a liaison between the city council and the department heads. Because unfortunately, Jim, we've had some struggles because we're just 5 people, as you know, for your many years. It's a little harder to manage, especially nowadays. So we had discussed the possibility of what would it cost us, and could we feasibly hire a city manager who also oversees the finance, because we feel that's a very, very important that we have the right person for that job.
Yeah, I've been through some finance challenges. Yes.
And just to follow up then on that, Jim, is we have taken lessons learned from your time on council and prior to it, and our own experiences over the last 3 to 4 years to try to figure out what is the best way to structure our city for good sustainment moving forward. Do we just throw it out there and hire another finance director only to see us in a predicament like we were? Or do we bite the bullet and bring on a title, for lack of a better word, a city manager, to help the city council?
We can change the city charter if need be. That's not an impossibility.
We can. But what we're looking for here is we didn't want to just throw out and hire a new director. I think 3-4 months ago, when our last director resigned and moved on to a new position. And instead of jumping through and just hiring someone, we wanted to do our due diligence. And Vicky and Julie have done a great job picking up the reins. And Summer here has been great stepping in and helping out with the budget side. So we could get an idea of what's the best, could we afford one, number one, on the budget. So we figured, well, let's use the budget cycle to figure that out. And what we're hearing from Summer is that, yes, well, we could afford one if we decide to, but it's going to cost us $53,000 more than the current position would have offered, which would have been the finance director position.
Okay, so that's
I have a question. So when we're talking about I'm going to speak for me. And if we're talking about our ability to afford a city manager with the $53,000 increase, we're looking at a proposed deficit in the operating budget of $147,000. So when we're asking ourselves, can we afford this? The answer would be no, unless we're in Congress. So I guess I don't understand how going in the hole to make our life a little bit easier makes any sense.
I know this is an important topic. So we're in the middle of a public hearing right now. And if you guys want to dive into this, I'm happy to present what I've prepared on this topic now. I was planning on doing it after the public hearing closed, but I'm happy to do it now if you'd rather. Mr. Chair, do you have a preference?
Okay, well, let's go ahead and at this point in time, let's go ahead and move on with the public hearing and stay with the agenda. And then once we move on, we can definitely discuss that more in depth, or it might be better actually at a council meeting too, as well. So, as the public hearing on the 2021-2022 budget, we've opened it. as presentation of the budget officer, have you finished that portion? Okay. And as the budget itself, questions and discussion by the budget committee. I mean, that's where we're at, is this, as spending more money. That's kind of think where we're with that one. There's room in the budget for that at this point in time to actually go forward with the discussion about actually hiring one that might be more appropriate in a council situation. But there's, we've got a little bit of room in there to do that. And, as we're well aware, these budgets can be adjusted as time goes on. But I was just kind of, feeling out the thoughts there and what's going on, in that. And, as the balance you were saying was our proposed budget, 2021, 2022, general fund beginning balance history seems to be declining, but there are other mitigating factors in that budget. So as in the possibility of hiring a finance director to oversee, and managing the city, is there any more discussion on that as when it relates to the budget? And I don't have any problems with discussing that further if we need to. So yeah, I think there is a point there, as in, our declining beginning fund inventory over the next few years that I'm looking at on page 8 of the general fund here. But looks like we do have some other mitigating proposals in here where it comes into the levy. So got a question about the levy itself. We're talking about increasing a levy to the citizens of Hubbard. And when it comes to, let's say me, I live in a house, what is that going to look like? I mean, is it going to be an increase in my county tax rate, or where am I going to see that out? And what is going to be our average tax increase when it comes to that levy?
I apologize. You're saying there's a new tax levy. We don't have a new tax levy in the proposed budget. Is the council considering an operating levy or some other form of tax levy?
I thought I read something in here on that.
Nope.
So we are projecting an increase in the property tax that's collected by the county and then turned over to the city. And that is just based on hopefully some new development in the community, and then increasing assessed value on your properties within the geographical area that collects tax for the city. So there isn't a increase in tax rate, just the amount that the city will receive.
All right, so there's not a separate levy that's being proposed then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Are we still in the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still in the public hearing on the 2021-2022 budget and the question discussion by committee.
And I know in the past, if I may, I know in the past, it appears from the minutes that the budget committee has, at this point, to the budget. And we can do that. My proposal in creating the agenda was to pull out that deeper dive and do that after the public hearing is taken care of. And so that's where the agenda item number 5 is going to come in, unless you'd rather do it now, where I have prepared some more information that gets us a little deeper into the budget.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and see if there's any public comments or questions on the 2021-2022 budget at this point in time. Okay. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on the budget and move into item number 5, budget review and discussion. So go ahead with what you prepared, please.
Great. Thank you for that. So I did prepare a few slides. I'm going to share them on my screen. What I am hoping to do is provide some information on, I have 4 topics that cover the entire budget. And then in the budget message, we talked about more detailed, the substantive changes to the budget. And then maybe we'll hear from the department heads if they have anything to add specific to their budgets. And then we'll dive into questions. Does that work for you?
That's fine, yes.
Okay, great. 1 minute. Are you all looking at a slide?
Yes, it's up.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right, so these are a few talking points. Again, picked out 4 things that I think were important for the budget committee to hear about this year. As you were looking through the budget, you will see that we have not redefined, but we're using the ending fund balance items at the end of each fund's budget a little differently than in the past. So those line items are contingency, which is operating contingency, reserves for future uses, and unappropriated ending fund balance. So general fund is our primary example here. If you look on page 33 of the packet, that is the last page of detailed general fund budget. And this is basically where the budget shakes out. And this is where we balance, and then we step back and assess. So for the proposed budget, we have a contingency. We had a reserve for a grant, but we don't need that anymore as of the end of this coming year. We have a reserve for future expenditures, and we have unappropriated ending fund balance with the 275. That 275 is a new concept. So I want to go into the definition of these according to Oregon budget law and just hit that briefly because we are using it differently this year. So operating contingency. This contingency concept can only exist in an operating type fund, and that's according to statute. So for example, if you have reserved dollars for a capital project fund that is only used for capital and not operating, it technically is not allowed to have a contingency amount. So some of those funds have had contingency amounts in the past. You will see they do not this year. For the funds that do have a contingency, I followed what had been done in the past and used the 15% of operating expenses as the contingency amount. The contingency amount is included in the amount that City Council will eventually appropriate, which means authorizes management to actually spend. However, management cannot spend out of that bucket. So if or something else you want to access those contingency dollars, you would go back to council and request a resolution, or potentially have to do it to move those into the category from which it'll be spent. That's what contingency is for. The lines that say reserve or reserve for future expenditures, those are basically set aside. Those are set aside. It's saying that, okay, we're doing a budget for next year, but at the end of next year, we want to make sure that we have some money set aside for whatever it is, for future operation, for a PERS reserve, for a rainy day fund. It could be just general or it could be by a specific line item. It's not going to be used for keeping sacred grant money or other monies that have to be used in a way that you haven't spent yet. So those reserve funds are not appropriated by council, so they are not authorized to spend. They sit there. If something happens and council wants to access those reserves for some reason, they can, but it would be through a supplemental budget process. So the last item is the unappropriated ending fund balance. This is the balance that you're setting aside, but it really maintain into that subsequent year. So Oregon budget law created this line specifically for usually general fund, but any fund that is using property tax monies. Because as you know, the property tax cycle, the city's not going to start getting property tax until November. So you need to set aside in your budget an amount that you cannot touch so that you will have enough going into that subsequent year to survive until November when the property tax money comes. That amount, because it's set aside and you know you're going to need it, cannot be accessed by council. You can't move it around unless there's some like catastrophic emergency, and then you're allowed to touch it. So if we loop back around to the general fund, as we built out this budget, we budgeted all the resources, we combed through all the expenditure and department budgets, and then we calculated the contingency, the 15%. So that's hanging out there. It can be used if something comes up. You just have to move it to where it needs to be spent from. This line called reserve for eco development project grant. So that is a grant you guys may remember. It was a 3-year grant getting $15,000 per year, and you get it at the time and then you have to spend it. So what's happening is you got your first 15 in 2020, you'll get another 15 in 2021 if you have. Next year, 2022, you'll see the last $15,000 increment coming in, but then you'll have to spend the entire $45,000. So by the end of next year, anything left, it would need to be set aside in that way. So I'm going to skip the next line and go down to the unappropriated ending fund balance. So this is the line that says, okay, this is what I need to survive, what my general fund needs to survive until the property tax money comes in. And you guys have franchise fees and you have other things coming in to offset that. So it's not like you're in danger of not being able to afford it, but it does need to be set aside according to Oregon budget law. So I did a calculation and a trend. I looked at the last 3 years of general fund and just looked at how much your cash balance went in that time frame. And it was somewhere in the vicinity of $250,000 to $300,000 decline in cash balance. So I put $275,000 in there as the amount to carry forward to the following year. The reserve for future expenditures is basically everything else. It is what is expected to carry forward to the following year, so 2023, if everything were to go exactly as budgeted. So that is slightly different. That whole protocol or methodology is slightly different than's been done in the past. Do you guys have questions about that?
I don't
I have a
have any
question.
questions, but I do want to point out that it does look good. I mean, if I'm looking at the total amounts on the bottom, regardless of how they're distributed into the categories,
yeah,
you know, we're going from last year's adopted basically 3.015 to 3.202. That's pretty healthy.
Yes. Yep. You guys are, it's definitely a healthy general fund. I'm not concerned about it. What you will notice is this is what was adopted. It's not the projection of where we think we're going to land. So the department heads and myself to some extent went through and said, okay, well, this is the budget we adopted for the current year that we're in. Where do we think we're going to land? Because we want to know how much is going to carry forward into the new budget, right? So we went through that process and we came up with an amount that we think will carry over. It's actually more than the 800,000 plus the 200,000. So if you add those two together, it's like 1.1 million of ending balance that was in the adopted budget. And it's, if our projections come out, it's gonna be closer to like 1.3-ish. So yay. But then looking at the current year, we're gonna spend that down a bit. Any other questions on that?
I have a question.
Sure.
Are we taking into account risk, like the price of wood's gone up 500% in some cases? Are we expecting that building is going to continue to happen at going? Do we take into account risks that something receive tax funds? I mean, what kind of risks did we take into consideration for these projections?
For the current year, it's based on what we're seeing. For future years, I only did a forecast for general fund, and general fund doesn't have, a lot of construction in it for the wood costs. Really in the forecast, again, I didn't do a full-blown analysis, but what I did factor in is moderate increases for revenues, your major revenue sources, and then expected increases for PERS, potentially other benefits, and then moderate increases for materials and services. So I will say that the 5-year forecast, how we're looking forward, is pretty conservative. And while it's conservative, it's not, at least when I did the work, was not factoring in any specific risks, such as the examples you're giving.
So, Summer, is it fair to say that your projected forecasts and so forth, they're not taking into account development on those 30 plus acres or anything else, system development charges, et cetera, coming in? It's based off of current revenue streams as it is today, with a conservative adjustment with tax increases or whatever else goes up with our property taxes.
Yes.
Okay. So you're actually almost a worst case scenario, as if everything was to stand still today in terms of development.
I would not say worst case scenario, because I could have made a lot worse.
Now, I don't want it to be much worse, but in that case.
But it is certainly it is assuming that you don't have any new revenue sources coming in, or big projects or developments or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Shall we move on?
Sure.
Nothing recommendations. All right, let's get into it. So, so again, this was council asking, as part of the budget process, to consider some different options for how the administrative functions could be staffed. So we were given 3 or 4 options. I ended up taking a look at 6 different options. Some of that came from discussions with department heads about just brainstorming what can we consider. So as part of this, I stepped back and said, okay, I'm learning a lot about the city of Hubbard. I don't know everything about the city of Hubbard, but just in working with the department heads, looking at the organization and its goals, here's what I am seeing as executive functions that I know this organization is going to need, and I'm not confident exist in the best possible capacity they could for the organization. So when I think about the executive management functions of an organization, I think about a bridge, either a bridge or like a funnel in a way. You need a way, it doesn't have to be a city manager, but this organization, what I'm seeing is that you have a council functioning well and getting a lot done. And then you have several managers, department heads, which are amazing and getting a lot done. I don't see an efficient and effective way of coordinating that and bringing everyone together and really driving things forward to meet the goals that you've set. I also see in executive leaders in local governments acting as a resource for council that I'm nervous that you don't have, or maybe you do. I'm not seeing it at this point. You have your department heads as individual resources, but not a resource that is overarching of the entire organization and advising council as to what might be a good direction to go. And I think that council and the organization would benefit from that. You need some strong budget and financial management. That's going to come from your management team. And that is deep and wide over budget, over audit, over financial infrastructure, over grant management, you know, everything, personnel requirements. It is broad and heavy. And you have some great staff in place now. Obviously, you need what I've been attempting to help with as much as I can, which is, again, the person to pull it together, to create the reports for council, to analyze how you're doing according to budget, and make recommendations to council. More accessible leadership for department heads. And I'm not necessarily hearing this from them, but what I can see and filter out of the budget process is that there is a certain level of decision-making authority that the department heads have, right? And outside of that authority, if they don't have the authority, it's going all the way to council, and it's waiting for a public meeting, and it's going through a public process. And I would like to see, and that's part of where the city manager recommendation came from, a big one, is that additional level of authority, where only the higher level purchases and contracts would go to the council level, and council would ideally delegate additional authority to an executive position. I see that being inefficient and more efficient, I think, for this organization. And then just that one person to be the foundation of the organization, bringing the team together, driving forward. Thoughts about that? Thoughts about key functions? What am I missing?
Someone different.
And I do have more slides, but just for executive functions, what am I missing?
Someone who knows the jobs and can lead.
I think that's kind of under bullet number one, right? A bridge between council and department heads.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's the key part.
Mm-hmm.
And that also fills the gap that we've been running into on council for the last 3 years, trying to get the reviews done. Making sure that we get the city department heads reviews done properly, on time, and giving them the proper respect and due diligence in efforts that we're putting forward to ensure that they're getting good, solid reviews. And we do, and one of the discussions within city council on this position was to help us alleviate some of that pressure every October to make sure that that's happening. Whether the council is aligned on that or not, that's what the discussions have been.
I'm going to continue on. If there aren't any other questions. So the positions that we looked at, again, city manager, full-time or part-time? What are the options? Finance director, full-time or part-time? Do we combine them somehow? Do we have one of each? We also looked at some combinations that considered some additional accounting clerk support. In some of the scenarios, that piece was missing, so you'd need to backfill that. So let's look at the options and how it panned out. So as you're looking at this chart, just to orient you a little bit, these are based off of the proposed budget as it was drafted at that time, which was 10 days ago or something. So It has changed a little bit, but it gives you a feel for, again, the incremental cost above or below status quo. So the blue bars are total for the city, and the green bar is just general fund. And that's the impact of each option, the total impact. Not the incremental, but the total. So the first option, number 1, is status quo. So that is, the city brings on a full-time finance director, no city manager position. When I pull that salary in, when I look at your salary range, it's pretty low for what's you're going to need to recruit for this position. It's going to stay a while. So I worked that in either at the top step or maybe a step down for salary, and then added in benefits. So that is approximately what you're going to be looking at for status quo. And that is primarily there for comparative purposes. Option 2 was having a part-time finance director, but no city manager. Option 3 was a full-time city manager that has the skill set to cover the key finance functions. They can run the budget process. They can manage your general ledger and ensure internal controls and those very important things. Number 4 is a full-time city manager and bringing in a part-time accounting clerk. Number 5 was a part-time city manager with the part-time accounting clerk. And 6 was a part-time city manager and a part-time finance director. So when I step back from, whenever I'm looking at something like this or decisions like this, for me, what I do first is say, okay, and I'm a finance person, right? So I'm going to set the cost aside for just a second, or try to really hard. And I'm going to think about, if money weren't an option, weren't an issue, it is. But if it weren't, what do I really feel like the city needs to move forward and accomplish its goals? And from what I understand, what I see from the outside perspective, and based on my experience, a city manager is crucial for where you guys are at as a city. So then for me, it was, is that realistic? Like, if council did want to go that direction, could they afford to do that? And just what they were asking, right? What would it look like? How much more would you have to pay? And that question of, could we find such a person, right? So could we find such a person? I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but there are people out there. So I have in my mind several of my colleagues, several is a stretch, a couple of colleagues who I know are have a finance background. They may or may not be a CPA, but they've been in the finance world and government finance world, and they are wanting to expand. A couple of them are assistant city managers / finance directors. And that's the kind of person that I think you could recruit. I truly do. It's not a given the market. There's a lot of demand for finance folks and for city managers. So that's a consideration. And assuming you could afford it, that was where I said, I think you got to take a shot at it. If I were in council's shoes and I wanted to have this conversation and consider a city manager, I would take a shot at it. Say, this is my first choice. We're going to go for it. We're going to try to recruit it. If we can't, here's plan B. And this budget that we built will accommodate that if council decides to go in that direction. So I'm looking at option 3 as my recommendation, which is to recruit a full-time city manager with a finance background, and maybe start with a 2-year contract for that position. Make sure you've got the right person, but also make sure that structure really is the best structure for your organization. At the end of 2 years, it's not working, you need a new person or you need a new structure, but that'll give you some flexibility. You have a lot of colleagues out there that have successful council management structures. Lean on them, get information from them if you haven't already. And League of Oregon Cities has consultants and experts that can advise on this and help make the decision about whether you want to go this direction. If you decide to go with a full-time city manager, I would want for you to find someone that you can truly trust and rely on. Because if you have a person in that position that you can't trust and rely on, it's going to be impossible to ask any city council to turn over any level of control or authority to a person that you don't trust. So find someone that you can trust, that you can hand the reins, step back, set expectations, and then let them go. Hold them accountable, but let them do their thing. That is my hope for the city and my recommendation. Here's what the cost looks like, because that is a question. So I'm sorry, I don't know who it was. It was Rocky or someone else. I apologize. But someone made the excellent point of this proposed budget is already, for general fund, is already looking at a deficit. And is it responsible? I think that just the question is it responsible for the budget committee to accept or approve a budget that has a deficit and is wanting to spend more for a city manager position? So here's what we're looking at for cost. So status quo was the 131,000 citywide, 43,000 total that would go to general fund. The rest is allocated to water, sewer, streets. Number 3, which is a full-time city manager that can cover the finance functions, is going to be closer to 184. All estimates, folks, right? And
That includes the package of insurance and everything, correct? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, well, actually not everything, because, you know, they might need a desk or.
Right, gotcha.
All of the salary and benefits. So that's the increment that I'm looking at, the 53,000. When I step back as a financial expert and look at where your general fund budget is, there are a few things in that proposed budget deficit that are one-time items, and there are some that are not. So the items that are one-time items are like equipment purchases. It's a one-time hit, and then, you know, it potentially goes away. It does go away unless you have other needs. It's the longer-term commitments that I would be more nervous about, and the city manager position is one of those. So the budget committee and council would be adopting a budget that doesn't commit to spending that much, but it opens up the possibility of spending that much. I will say that that person, that city manager person, is going to be the one, again, that's driving the city forward. They're the ones that are championing economic development. They are looking for new resource opportunities to bring in. They are the ones who are going to help maintain. They're going to have the capacity and the skill set to figure out how to maintain general fund and find that right balance between having enough but not having too much, and providing the level of service that you can. So I wanted to show you how these broke out from an allocation standpoint. So here are the 3 options. The full-time city manager, here's your total cost of 184. General fund is going to take 129 of that, and the rest is allocated to street, sewer, and water. And those allocations are similar to how Actually, I think they're the same as how the city recorder / director of administration is allocated now. Use that same allocation formula. So I came back around with the city manager position and just thought about, is this recommendation really going to accomplish what the city needs? And I believe it will. And these are similar, if not exact, to the functions that were defined at the beginning. It's supporting your department heads. It's making sure city council has informed decisions. It's creating that bridge between your governing body, which is policy making and goal setting and setting priorities, and then your doers that are executing. It's the go-between to help manage that effectively. This person will help create a steady, ideally a steady budget and financial management for the organization. And hopefully offset their salary and wages by new resources. That would be my expectation. That'd be a clear expectation if I were in council's shoes that I would set as a goal for this new position. And that is my recommendation. Those amounts are worked into this proposed budget, so they are there should council want to go in that direction. And I'm ready for questions. Bring it on.
I have a question, Summer. And I don't know if we answered it at a previous council meeting or not, but do you know how many cities of our size can you recollect that has the same format we do of running a city without a city manager?
I do not know the stat. I know of exactly 0. I'm sure there probably are. And you guys, I have no skin in the game, right? I am not an employee of the city. I care which direction you go. I care about the community, but I mean, nothing bad happens to me, whichever decision you make. But as I work with all of my clients, several of which are about the same size as Hubbard, every one of them has a full-time city manager and a full-time finance director and finance staff, and they're working their butts off just to keep running and to keep up with council's goals. So I can't imagine those organizations at this point functioning without the city manager or city administrator.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I may interject, there was that report that we provided to you at the council meeting that Julie did a study on cities that were similar size as ours, and there were only 2, and the city of Hubbard was 1.
That's what I thought, and I was hoping you'd bring that up, Vicki. Thank you.
Is that within this? That's the state of Oregon, right?
Yes, that was within the state of Oregon.
And to be honest, you guys, I told the department heads this as I was letting them know of what my recommendation was going to be. If I were going to look at this organization and I had to decide between a city manager and a finance director, obviously I'm showing you in this recommendation. I'm a CPA. I love my finances and I want everyone to be fiscally responsible, yada, yada. But if I had to choose for the greater good of the organization and the community, I would forego a finance director for a city manager. And that's not to say I would let the finances fall aside. You have to find a way to meet minimum requirements. But that city manager, that's the core, can't be the core of an organization.
Okay,
I
so
have a quick question for you.
go ahead.
So my question is, if we have somebody similar that's already doing this job and maybe just give them a little pay increase to their position, like add some descriptions to their job, that would cut down the $53,000 a year, and then we won't have to find somebody that could do that position if we already have that person that's doing the job and just add that that city part to their position, and then just give them a little perk increase to take the job on, and then we're good, aren't we?
It's a possibility. Yeah, it's an option. To be honest, I shouldn't even say that. I'm not going to say that. I think it'd be a hard sell. Let me put it that way. Because you'd be asking that person to take on substantially more responsibility for decision making, for communication, for management in general. So a little bump in their salary, I think you'd likely have to do better than that in order to convince someone to take on that responsibility.
We discussed in the beginning that we kind of have one shot to get this right. And we have to make the best informed decision as a group that we can.
And I agree that whether or not to bring on a city manager, or just in general what the administrative staffing is going to look like and what your structure is going to look like is a council decision. What the budget committee needs to decide is whether or not this proposed budget, of which this is built in, is moving the organization in a positive direction toward the goals and priorities of the organization. So that's the budget committee's role.
So Summer, just to echo what you're saying there, is the budget committee here is not saying, yay, let's all hire a city manager. It is just showing that we could potentially do it, but it still goes back to council to decide whether we're going to do a finance director or a city manager or status quo.
Right. And I would not be recommending a city manager if I thought it was going to put you in financial jeopardy.
And I think that's what we were all hoping to hear, that type of a recommendation, or at least that type of guidance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else on that?
Yeah, as a budget committee, you know, a lot of the stuff should be, you know, oriented towards more of a council meeting. You know, just a little bit on this is, you know, our current, at least a while back, our current department heads are pretty much gainfully employed in doing what they're doing, you know, and to take on a finance director in addition to their current job may be a bit challenging. So just taking one of our current department heads and adding in the finance director position and just giving a little bump in salary may not necessarily be the best answer. You know, if as a city council we're looking at that, then, you know, take one of our current department heads, move them into a more of a city manager type position, and then director and as an answer to that. And but that's not really what we're, you know, as a budget committee, what we're here to get too in depth in. I mean, that's definitely a significant discussion as city council goes. And I would definitely be interested in going to those council meetings and putting my 2 cents in, at least from my point of view. But as a budget committee meeting, we have to decide on our current budget and should we move forward with what we have. So we've gone through the review and discussion portion. A lot of great discussion out there about how we're going to handle, you know, our future staffing and the budgets that are involved in that. You know, it's you know, a lot of great ideas out there. Nothing wrong with anything we talked about. But let's go ahead and move forward. But I definitely want to leave it open to any more discussion. Is there any more discussion out there?
I have a couple other items I wanted to bring up with the budget committee when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to touch quickly with you folks about the operational overhead allocation. Not that anything's wrong with it, just to let you know how we've approached it. This is basically a calculation of your general funds administrative costs, plus the city council expenses, and it takes that bucket of expenses and allocates it out to the other departments that are using those services. So we used, I decided to use the same allocation methodology that's been used in the past. There's nothing wrong with it. It's pretty broad and general, which keeps it simple. And I think it, at the end of the day, gets you close to an appropriate allocation. Actually, I think it is an appropriate allocation. There are other more detailed ways you could do it that just make it more complicated. So I felt comfortable with the way that it's been done. Which departments are paying overhead or paying back into the general fund? The internal departments for core community development, police, parks, those are within general fund. They are calculated. We calculate an allocation for them, but we don't technically take it out of their department. It's just absorbed within the general fund. However, because streets, sewer, and water are operating funds that are outside of general fund, we do budget for a transfer from those funds back into the general fund to offset those costs. And it's a calculation just based on operating expenses. So we look at operating expenses by fund, so personnel services and materials and services, and we look at how much each fund is spending on those operations. Looking at just theoretically that if a fund has more personnel and more materials activity and more expenditure activity, that theoretically they're going to use more administrative support for processing accounts payable and processing payroll and reporting. So that's just a quick touch. That's all I necessarily had to say about the allocation. I just wanted to let you know that it is an important part of the budget. It is prominent throughout your budget, and I am comfortable with how it's being allocated at this point. Any questions on that? All right. Last thing is your reserve fund. I wasn't sure about this when I first saw how the city has been managing its reserve fund, and it made me a little nervous. But as I got into it, I started to kind of really like it, because for the city of Hubbard, what they're doing is they're tracking which funds have paid in to the reserve fund this direction for which specific items that are being reserved for. And generally speaking, I don't see that level of detail. And for a large organization, that would be overkill. But for a smaller organization, I like it. So this is what is happening with the city's reserve fund in the proposed budget. So there is a beginning balance coming in, and then, and it's up above, I apologize, you can't see that piece. But the rows here are the funds that are paying in or transferring money into this separate reserve fund. And as the departments set those transfers, they say, hey, Summer, street fund is going to transfer $200 in for a dump truck and $6,000 in for this tractor mower that we're going to buy sometime in the future or save up for. And then it's tracked by column for each individual asset, so that when city staff is ready to purchase one of these assets that's been reserved for, they know exactly how much is in that bucket set aside for that specific item. And they can go back and find out who contributed toward that asset. So this is a picture of where you guys are sitting, or where the city theoretically will be sitting at the end of 21-22. With these balances down here in green at the bottom, saved for each of those assets across the top. Does that make sense? Is that useful information? I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to share that with you and just make sure that it was transparent in the budget. A little more transparency about that.
It lessens the blow to the fund when we have some already there and we absolutely need something.
Absolutely, and we saw that happen with some uses of the reserve funds in this current fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so they've been contributing all these years, or the past several years, to lessen the hit, and it's effective. So well done. I like it. So that is the information that I wanted to share for the budget. We could go fund by fund. I don't know that that's necessary unless it adds value for you guys. We have covered the major changes in the budget, both in the message and further discussion. And I covered some of the overlapping and went more into more detail on the major changes and some of the other information that impacts the entire budget. If you have other questions, I would be happy to answer those. And actually also, if it's okay with the budget committee, I would love to reach out to the department heads that are here and see if they have anything to add for their specific budgets. Would that be okay, Chair?
Can't hear you, Jim, but I'm assuming it's a nod of a, it's fine.
Okay, there we go. I apologize.
There you go.
It's okay.
Yeah, yeah, if the department heads would like to provide input, that is perfectly fine.
So this is Dave Rash. Jim, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, yes, sir.
I just want to clarify on the capital outlay. I think Summer's referring it to radios, and I was trying to scramble where are we getting radios at, but that is actually the 56,000 when I first got hired in February of 2018 for radio towers. The triangulation that's still, I don't know where they're at, so we keep moving that each year to the capital outlay.
Clarifying that.
When it happens, we have some money there for it.
So give me a little bit.
So when I did the proposal, it was out of contingency fund. It was February 2018, and it's, I don't know, there was a big talking about merging the two dispatch centers. There's talk about going to a whole new radio system. It's basically been on hold. So we keep moving the money to fix the tower on the tower on the our water tower in the I forget that road, Crosby, and where the other one is. So our portion was 56,000.
Okay, so I must be missing a little bit of background on this. So I remember back several years ago where we went with Metcom. So is Metcom merged or merging with someone where combining more than one 911 center?
No, there was talk about it, but I don't think it's moving forward at this time with the Willamette Valley, I think it's called. Salem and the Sheriff's Office Dispatch Center.
Okay, and so in this proposed merge, we were going to spend some money to redo the antennas. And
No,
so it's just,
no. When I first got here, they were looking to improve the radio system at Metcom, and they said that the radio towers, the one on our water tower on Crosby Road, and I think maybe the Woodburn Water Facility, would create a better triangulation. The whole cost is like 160,000. Our portion was 56,000, or 1/3. And it's just been pushed aside. Coming up on 4 years now.
okay, so we're just carrying that forward at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is one of the one-time expenditures that's contributing to the annual, the year deficit, the 150 deficit for this upcoming year. Fortunately, it's a one-time, so thank you, Chief. Mike or Vicki, do you have anything you wanted to add about your budgets? If you don't, it's okay. Just wanted to offer.
I didn't want to add anything to my budget. I just wanted to, again, thank you, Summer. This has been one of the better budgets since probably 2000 for detail and presentation. And I just wanted to thank you and appreciate what you did for the city of Hubbard this year.
Very welcome. Thank you. I've enjoyed working with you, truly. Okay.
Okay.
Any
Any other review or discussion? Committee or council members?
I had one quick question. And it was on the proposed budget, the personnel expenses summary. Almost like the last page. And it had to do with the admin assistant under the administration department. And looking at the current budget that we had, it was at 49,598, but the proposed budget for next year is 49,400. Am I missing something on the way down, or?
I don't think you're missing something. Some of the schedules that we worked on in preparing the budget were like down to the penny or maybe dollar. And then as I summarized for the budget, I did some rounding. So I believe the difference that we're looking at here is just a rounding difference.
Okay.
Is there any other questions or discussions? At this point, I would like to ask for a motion for an approval of the tax levy amount as proposed.
Levy amount, as a reminder, is $3.9772 per 1,000 of assessed market value. So it's at $3.9772 that you would be looking to levy.
Then I would like to make a motion that this committee approve the current tax levy amount as presented.
I'll second.
Okay.
Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And any opposed? Not hearing nays. I'll go ahead and it has been approved, the tax levy amount. And we'll go ahead and look at approval for the 2020-2021 budget. And I ask for a motion of that.
I make a motion, we approve the budget for fiscal year 2020 to 2021 as stated.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Summer, we need to repeat the motion, please. There's an error in the agenda. It has the wrong fiscal year. We're actually looking at the budget for 2021-22.
Okay, you're right.
That was me.
Creatures of habit, we just read what's presented. I make a motion that we approve the budget for fiscal year 2021 to 2022 as stated before us.
I would second the motion.
All right. And all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, is there a nay in the?
Tyler was a nay.
Okay. And so, Tyler, what is your question about the approval?
Yeah, there's just no way. There's no question. It's just a comment, and it'll be unpopular with this group for sure. But fiscal responsibility and negative operating budget they don't run in the same sentence. And I think the people who elected me in November to my seat on the council would expect nothing less of me than to not approve, negative operating budget for this budget cycle.
Okay. Any other discussion about that from the rest of the committee or council? Okay. So we had one nay. And that would make 13 yeas. So the it has been approved for the budget for fiscal year 2021, 2022. Okay. If not, any other questions about that at this point in time? If not, then I would ask for a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second? Do I hear a second for adjournment?
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Not hearing an opposed, this meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Summer. Thank you, department head.
Summer.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for all of your input. It's been great. And we'll definitely have to take a look at that negative balance in the near future.
Thank you all for participating and providing your input. It's important. Asked great questions.
Good night.
Have a good night, guys.
Everybody, have a good night.
Have a good night.
Good night. I knew there was